Grant Foundation, a charitable organization in New York City that supports research to improve the lives of young people. Mr. Gamoran joined WT Grant Foundation from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where he held the John D. MacArthur Chair in Sociology and Educational Policy Studies. At the foundation, he leads efforts to fund research on reducing inequality in youth outcomes and improving the use of research evidence in decisions that affect young people. His own research is focused on educational inequality and school reform.
Thank you, Denny, and thanks to all of you for joining us here today to discuss private-public collaboration on ways to revitalize communities across America. As my title, I've chosen Out of the Ivory Tower, because we are a research-supporting foundation, and yet we want to draw the academic researchers out of the ivory tower and into communities to carry out research that matters and that can point the way towards revitalizing communities. The William T. Grant Foundation was founded in 1936 by William T. Grant, who expressed his commitment to understanding human behavior through research by endowing this foundation to support social science research. The specific focus of the foundation has shifted over time according to the most pressing challenges of the day. Currently, the mission of the foundation is to support research to improve the lives of young people. And by young people, we mean those ages 5 to 25 in the United States. We have two main focus areas within that mission. The first is research, to support research on reducing inequality among young people. And the second is research on improving the way evidence from research is used in policies and practices that affect young people. Now, much of our funding goes out through our major research grants program. And here we're aiming to fund studies that are both rigorous and relevant. Sometimes those two notions are seen as in opposition to one another. If research is relevant, it can't possibly be using rigorous methods, and if it's using rigorous methods, it can't possibly be relevant to the day-to-day lives of young people. Well, we think that is a false dichotomy. In fact, research is only relevant if it is rigorous, and rigor brings power to studies that are relevant to people's lives. So the work we support are aimed at addressing one of our two focus areas, reducing inequality and using research evidence. And I've emphasized the verbs in that statement because although there's a lot of research on how much inequality there is, what its sources are, and what its terrible consequences are, it's time to focus on strategies for reducing inequality. And that's what we are supporting. In addition, we've done a good job of identifying barriers to using evidence from research in policymaking. It's not timely, it's not relevant, it's not accessible. What we need is research that points the way to using evidence, the conditions that make it more likely that policymakers such as yourselves, practitioners out in the field, leaders out in communities will use research in their decision making. A second major focus of our funding is the William T. Grant Scholars Program. And this is not a grant for a specific project, but it's a career development award to help nurture some of our brightest early career scholars, to stretch into new areas, to expand their expertise with supportive mentoring, to take us to new places in research on reducing inequality and using evidence for research. What I want to focus on today are two new grant programs at the foundation that are specifically aimed at revitalizing communities. Both focus on reducing inequality in youth outcomes. And both draw lessons from the findings of our grantees about improving the use of research evidence. Moreover, both demonstrate the value of applying rigorous research to pressing social problems. But one aims at institutional change and thus has a deliberate pace, and the other is rapid. So the first is our Institutional Challenge Grant. This grant program, this new grant program, calls on universities to build a partnership with a public agency or a nonprofit organization to jointly develop a research agenda and provide fellows to carry out the research agenda. Now, these first two points are taken directly from the findings of our grantees in the use of research evidence portfolio, because what we've learned, just as Patrick said, it's about partnerships. If you want evidence to be used, that's much more likely if the researchers and policymakers are developing the agenda together, identifying which questions can be pursued, which questions are researchable, and carrying out that research so that the questions that are asked are ones for whom the answers are needed by policymakers who are ready to make a decision. A third challenge in this Institutional Challenge Grant is to build the capacity of the agency to use evidence in its decision-making. And the fourth, and perhaps most challenging of all, is to reshape incentives within the university to support engagement, engaged scholarship, partnership-oriented research, again, to draw the faculty out of the ivory tower and into the communities. Well, we've had one round of this competition for our Institutional Challenge Grant, and the first winner is Cornell University, working in partnership with the Cornell Cooperative Extension of Tompkins County, a rural county in upstate New York. The research challenge that this, next slide. The research challenge that this partnership is investigating is to address the terrible opioid addiction, opioid epidemic, which is highly prevalent in Tompkins County, and reducing child maltreatment, which has risen concurrently with the rise in opioid addiction. The research team will evaluate two specific interventions, one in the judicial system and one in the child welfare system, and they will undertake a 5-year process to build the capacity to use research evidence in the county and to build incentives within the university for researchers to address local challenges. The second new program that's also focused on communities is our Rapid Response Research Grants. Now, these are designed for cases where the research already exists. Unlike the Institutional Challenge Grant, where there's a 5-year process of identifying the agenda, unfolding the research, building capacity to use the findings, these are for cases where the research already exists, but it needs to be contextualized for a specific need. Rapid means going from proposal to findings to action in 15 months or less. Now, that might not sound like rapid to you, but in the research world, 15 months is really this lightning speed. A key feature of the rapid response research proposals is that they do not contain dissemination plans. Have you ever seen a grant proposal? They always have dissemination plans. Oh, I'm going to write stuff up and then I'm going to tell everybody about it. These proposals have engagement plans where the community partner, the public agency or private nonprofit, is going to take action with the research that's been developed. And this works because the partner and the researchers have developed the questions together. And so they are poised, the policy partner is poised to take action once the research findings have been synthesized. By research, we mean based on existing bodies of evidence, and by response, we mean protecting vulnerable children and youth in these challenging times. We've awarded now 6 rapid response research grants. 2 are focused on social services for children of immigrants. 1 is focused on state policy and the other on child welfare offices. The third focuses on the integration of Muslim refugee children in school. Again, in each case, the question was developed together by a local partner and the researchers. For example, in this example, Duke University working with the Durham Public Schools and World Relief Durham to integrate Muslim refugee students who have arrived in their community. The fourth example is a program of school safety for teenage sexual minority youth that's being developed by researchers at the University of Texas at Austin in conjunction with the Genders and Sexualities Alliance, the state of Texas. The fourth is rebuilding youth employment services in Puerto Rico following Hurricanes Irma and Maria. As you can imagine, youth employment activities have been devastated like everything else in Puerto Rico. We were approached by a social service agency that deals with youth employment, asking for help. What is the best research knowledge about, we're starting from scratch here. We might as well draw on evidence. And we partnered them up with some researchers with expertise in youth employment and researchers with expertise in Puerto Rico, synthesizing the best available knowledge and applying it to that case. And the last example is once again addressing the opioid crisis, this time in 2 counties in rural Ohio. The last case that I'll talk about as far as using research to revitalize communities across America is the example of the Community Foundation Opportunity Network. This is a network of 45 community foundations plus 3 national funders that have come together with the mission of closing opportunity gaps for young people. They were inspired by a book by Robert Putnam, the well-known political scientist from Harvard, wrote a book called Our Kids, describing the loss of opportunity in underprivileged areas across our nation. And this group is inspired to respond with by applying research evidence to restoring opportunity networks. The strategies they've selected are to implement research-based approaches identified in recent consensus reports. And indeed, you may be aware there have been 3 major reports recently chock full of specific strategies to restore opportunity, reduce inequality, cut poverty, and raise mobility. And they are the Closing the Opportunity Gap, next slide, Closing the Opportunity Gap from the Saguaro Seminar at Harvard, Opportunity, Responsibility, and Security, a joint report of the American Enterprise Institute and the Brookings Institution, and the latest, Restoring the American Dream, from the Partnership for Mobility from Poverty at the Urban Institute, supported by the Gates Foundation. So efforts by researchers and research funders to improve the quality of evidence have succeeded. We're in a much better position today than we were 15 years ago when it comes to identifying specific strategies to reduce inequality and improve equity. But there's still a barrier to evidence-informed policy. It's at the point where evidence gets used. Here, too, I make the case that research funders have a role. We can support partnerships between researchers and policymakers. We can require not dissemination plans, but engagement plans. And we can incentivize research faculty to come down from the ivory tower, get their fingers dirty with the real world. Private philanthropy is leading the way, and federal support will be essential for large-scale change. We're asking our federal partners to first support research that tests the effectiveness of programs, and second, to support research that tests strategies for ensuring that research that's produced is used to facilitate large-scale change.